The ice rain sounded like handfuls of gravel thrown against the plate glass of the Rook and Raven. Every time the heavy oak door swung open, a gust of wind sliced in from the North Vale River, carrying the smell of frozen metal and diesel. It was a Tuesday night, just past 9 o'clock, and the restaurant was a frantic mess of damp cashmere and clattering plates. My name is Ava Linwood, and my feet felt like 2 blocks of frozen cement. My apron, usually a crisp black, was damp with condensation and a splash of Sauvignon Blanc from table 7. I was running on 4 hours of sleep and the fumes from a stale energy drink. In my pocket, my phone vibrated with another text I couldn't afford to read. I knew what it was. Miklos, my landlord. The subject line would just be rent, all caps, followed by a threat about the locks on my studio apartment. It was the 23rd of the month. He was early. The vulture. That vibration was followed by a deeper, colder knot in my stomach. The rent was bad. My mother's medical bills were biblical. The dialysis center didn't do payment plans for at-risk patients, which was their polite way of saying people who might not make it to the end of the month. I needed $800 by Friday just for the copay on her next treatment. I had $63 and change in my checking account. Linwood Table 4 needs their check. Table 9 wants another round of the Macallan. And VIP Table 14 is just watch yourself over there. That was Kurt Danner, our shift manager. He was a man perpetually sweating through his polyester vest, his eyes darting around like frightened mice. On it, Kurt. I forced a smile that felt like cracking plaster and grabbed the leather folio for Table 4. I navigated the floor, a ballet of excuse me and right away. The noise was a dull roar, the scrape of forks on porcelain, the murmur of 100 conversations, and the relentlessly smooth jazz trio in the corner playing something low and mournful. Then I focused on VIP Table 14. It wasn't a table, it was an alcove, set back from the main floor and shielded by heavy velvet curtains. It was the no-menu spot. You sat there, you got what you were given, and you never saw a bill. Tonight, it was occupied by 4 men in suits so dark they seemed to drink the light. They weren't talking loud. In fact, they were barely talking at all. It was a negotiation. You could feel it. The air was thick with the kind of silence that costs money. At the head of the table, facing the room, sat Silas Voss. I didn't need the whispers from the kitchen staff to know who he was. All of North Vale knew. You didn't see his picture in the paper, but you saw his name on the shipping manifest down at the docks. Voss Consortium. He was the ghost who owned the waterfront, the man rumored to control every container, every union man, every pound of cargo that moved through this rusting industrial city. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s. His black hair was cut sharp, military grade. He wasn't big, but he was dense, solid, like he was carved from the same granite as the bank buildings downtown. He was listening to the man on his right, his head tilted slightly. He wasn't smiling. I'd worked here 6 months and I'd never seen him smile. My job was just to refill their water. Still, not sparkling. Voss preferred tap water. The taste of the city, he'd allegedly told Kurt once. I approached, my rubber-soled shoes making no sound on the thick rug. More water, gentlemen. The talking stopped. 4 pairs of eyes snapped to me. My hands, already chapped from the cold and the harsh soap, started to tremble. Silas Voss didn't look up. He was tracing the rim of his empty glass with 1 finger. Please, he said. His voice was quiet, a low vibration that barely carried, but it cut through the restaurant's noise like a razor. I poured. My hand was steady until I got to his glass. As I tilted the heavy glass pitcher, a single drop of water missed the glass and splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth, landing an inch from his cufflink. I froze. The man across from him, a beefy guy with a broken nose, let out a sharp hiss of breath. Silas Voss slowly lifted his gaze from the table and met my eyes. His were gray, flat, and utterly unreadable. They weren't angry. They weren't anything. They just saw... He looked at me, at the small, spreading dark spot on the linen. I'm so sorry, sir. That was clumsy. I'll get a fresh cloth. My voice was a squeak. He just stared for another second. Then he very deliberately placed his hand over the damp spot, covering it completely. It's handled, he said. He nodded once. A dismissal. I fled, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I leaned against the service station wall, gasping for air. Breathe, Ava, I whispered. Just breathe. You need this job. 10 minutes later, the meal at table 14 was over. The other 3 men stood up, shook Voss's hand once, and left without a word. Voss remained seated, signing a few papers from a thin leather briefcase. Kurt hurried over to me, holding a black leather folio. This is the comp slip for table 14. Just drop it, say good night, Mr. Voss, and walk away. Do not talk. Do not make eye contact. Got it. Got it, Kurt. But I was flustered. The encounter had rattled me. Table 4 was flagging me down. Table 9 was complaining about the whiskey, and my mind was on my mother's dialysis machine. I grabbed the folio from Kurt, grabbed the check for the table 10, a rowdy birthday party that had ordered 3 bottles of champagne and the entire seafood tower, and headed for the floor. I dropped the check for table 10, picked up their card, and then turned to the alcove. My mistake was one of pure, exhausted autopilot. I walked to VIP table 14. Silas Voss was putting his pen away, a heavy, black fountain pen that looked more expensive than my car. Mr. Voss, I said, my voice trembling. I placed the leather folio on the table in front of him. He looked at it. He opened it. I saw his eyes scan the total. I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. It wasn't a smile. It was the faint, sharp crescent of a new moon, something cold and dangerous. The total on that bill was $2,480.55. I hadn't given him the comp slip. I had given him the massive bill for the birthday party at table 10. My blood turned to ice water. My stomach evaporated. Oh, my Mr. Voss, I'm so sorry. That is the wrong. I reached for it, babbling, my face burning with a heat that defied the ice storm outside. He put his hand on the folio, stopping me. He didn't look at me. He just picked up his pen again, clicked it open, and signed the credit card slip at the bottom. He signed Silas Voss in a clean, black, unforgiving script. He added no tip. He just signed it. He pushed the folio back toward me. I stood there, paralyzed, a new kind of terror setting in. He had just paid $2,480 for a meal he was never supposed to be charged for. I took the folio. Sir, this was a mistake. Our mistake. I'll get Mr. Danner. He finally looked up at me again, leaning back in his chair. He studied my face, my cheap earrings, the fraying cuff of my white shirt. He tilted his head like a bird of prey considering a field mouse. We shed our skins over small mistakes, Miss Linwood, he said, his voice still that same quiet rumble. He knew my name. He stood up, adjusted his cuffs, and walked out of the restaurant. The doorman, wide-eyed, scrambled to open the door for him. I was still standing there, holding the signed slip for $2,480, when Kurt Danner skidded to a halt beside me, his face the color of spoiled milk. He didn't yell. He whispered, which was so much worse. "Oh, what did you do?" he hissed. Snatching the folio from my hand, he saw the signature. He saw the amount. "Oh, God, oh my God, you just wrote your own termination? Ava, you know who that is. You just insulted him. He doesn't pay for things here. He owns things. You're fired. Get your stuff. Get out." "Kurt, it was an accident. He signed it. He paid it." "That's worse." Kurt was actually shaking. "He paid it to make a point. The point is that you're an idiot, and I'm an idiot for hiring you. Get out, now, before he changes his mind and comes back." Tears, hot and angry, burned my eyes. Fired for a clumsy mistake. Fired when I was $63 away from ruin. I stumbled back to the staff locker room, my chest tight. The smell of disinfectant and stale coffee hung in the air. I ripped off the damp apron, my movements jerky and furious. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I grabbed my thin coat and my backpack. As I shoved the apron into the linen hamper, my hand brushed something in the deep front pocket. It wasn't my notepad. It wasn't my collection of pens. It was thick. It was heavy. It was wrapped in a simple rubber band. I pulled it out. My fingers fumbled. It was a stack of cash, $100 bills, neatly bundled, crisp, smelling faintly of expensive leather and that cold, metallic scent that lingered around Voss. I started counting. My fingers went numb. I counted again. It was $10,000. There was no note, no explanation, just $10,000 sitting in the pocket of the apron I had almost thrown away. This wasn't a tip. This wasn't a severance package. This was something else. This was an anchor, and I couldn't tell if it was meant to save me or drown me. I shoved the money deep into my backpack, zipping it up with trembling hands. I felt sick. $10,000. It would cover my mother's treatments for months. It would pay Miklos. It would let me breathe. It felt like poison. I bypassed the front door and pushed open the heavy steel exit into the back alley. The ice rain hit me instantly, stinging my face. The alley stank of wet garbage and the fryer oil from our kitchen. I just wanted to get to the bus stop and disappear. Ma'am Ava Linwood. I flinched, spinning around. Two men. They weren't in uniform, but they screamed cop in a way that had nothing to do with a badge. They wore cheap suits under heavy wool coats, their shoes soaked. One was short and barrel-chested. The other was tall and thin as a starved stray. "Who are you?" "We're with the North Vale Urban Compliance Office," the short one said, flashing a laminated ID so quickly I couldn't read it. "Just need to ask you a few routine questions about your employer." "I just got fired." My voice was small. Even better," the tall one said. He had a smoker's rasp. "You probably saw a lot. We're interested in the shipping manifests, specifically anything related to Loading Bay 9. Loading Bay 9. The words meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, it was heavy. "I'm a waitress," I said, backing up against the brick wall. The ice was making the concrete slick. "I serve food. I don't know anything about shipping." "We think you do," the short one said, taking a step closer. He was smiling, but it was all teeth. "We heard you're real close with the management, real accommodating. Maybe you heard Mr. Voss mention Loading Bay 9. My heart was a fist punching my throat. They weren't cops, or if they were, they weren't the kind that helped people. Before I could answer, a long, black sedan, the same one I'd seen Voss get into, glided to the end of the alley, blocking the only exit to the street. Its headlights cut through the sleet, turning the two men into stark silhouettes. The engine was utterly silent. The driver's door opened. Silas Voss stepped out. He wasn't wearing an overcoat. The ice rain slicked his black hair, but he didn't seem to notice the cold. He stood framed by the headlights, a shadow against the glare. He looked at the two men. He looked at me, huddled against the wall. Then he looked back at them. "Are you gentlemen lost?" he asked. His voice was still quiet, but in the narrow alley it echoed off the bricks like a gunshot. The two men stiffened. The tall one's hand twitched toward his coat. "We're official business, Mr. Voss," the short one stammered. "Urban compliance." "Compliance." Voss tasted the word. "My property line extends to that sewer grate. You're trespassing and you're bothering my staff." "My staff? I wasn't his staff. I was fired." "We were just leaving," the tall one said, grabbing his partner's arm. They shuffled backward, eyes locked on Voss. They didn't turn their backs to him. They crab-walked away, disappearing into the darkness at the other end of the alley, leaving behind the lingering, cheap smell of stale cigarettes. Silas Voss stood there for a moment. The alley was silent again, save for the tick-tick-tick of the ice on the car's roof. He turned his flat, gray eyes to me. I couldn't move. The $10,000 in my bag felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I understood. The money wasn't a tip. It wasn't an apology. It was a retainer. It was a leash. The silence stretched. I should have said thank you. I should have asked what was going on, but my throat was closed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound was obscenely loud in the quiet. I fumbled for it, my fingers stiff with cold. The screen glowed. It was my mother. I answered, my voice a wreck. "Mom, are you okay?" "Ava, honey, I'm so sorry." Her voice was weak, strained with fatigue. "The clinic just called. There's an opening for an emergency flush tomorrow morning. They said my potassium levels are too high. They need the co-pay before they'll schedule it. 7 o'clock. Can we? I looked at the $10,000 in my bag, then at the man standing in the rain. I closed my eyes. "Yes, Mom, I'll handle it. I have the money. Don't worry, I'll be there." I hung up, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I looked at Voss. I clutched the strap of my backpack, the cash a solid, terrifying weight against my back. I made my choice, or rather, it was made for me. "Thank you," I whispered to him. He just nodded, as if accepting a business report. He walked back to his car. Before he got in, he paused, his hand on the door. "Don't take the number 6 bus tonight, Miss Linwood." He got in. The sedan pulled away, its tires making no sound on the icy pavement, and vanished into the storm. I was alone in the alley. The number 6 was my bus. It was the only way I got home. I looked back at the Rook and Raven. Through the steamed-up glass, I could see the warm lights, hear the faint, muffled sound of the jazz trio. They had shifted keys. The music was darker now, slower, full of long, unresolved notes. The night was nowhere near over. It was just beginning. I didn't take the number 6 bus. That warning from Silas Voss echoed in my head, colder than the ice storm. It meant he knew my routine. It meant my routine was dangerous. It meant he was dangerous. I took a cab. The ride cost $22, more than a third of my legitimate money. The driver's heater was broken, and I shivered in the back seat, the $10,000 in my backpack feeling like a radioactive brick against my spine. My apartment building, Greystone 12, loomed out of the sleet. It was a 6-story block of damp brick and misery, a place where the hallways always smelled like boiled cabbage and old carpet. I paid the driver and ran inside, clutching the backpack strap so hard my knuckles were white. The lobby was empty, the single fluorescent light flickering over the cracked linoleum. I bolted up the 3 flights of stairs, my footsteps echoing. I fumbled with my keys, my fingers numb, shoving the door open and slamming it shut, throwing the deadbolt in the chain. Home. My studio apartment was freezing. The radiator in the corner gurgled but produced no heat. This was Miklos Arden's specialty. I dropped my bag on the worn futon and went straight to the small kitchen, running the tap until the water was lukewarm, splashing it on my face. I was still shaking. Fired, $10,000. Don't take the number 6 bus. My eyes landed on the utility bill taped to my fridge, a reminder from Miklos. My electricity bill for the last 30 days, $212, for a 300-square-foot studio. I grabbed my phone, my jaw tight with an old, familiar anger. I went back into the hallway, quieter this time. The communal utility closet was at the end of the hall, secured with a flimsy padlock that everyone knew a butter knife could open. I didn't even need that. I just jiggled the handle and the rusted latch gave way. Inside was a spiderweb of wires and a row of rattling, spinning electric meters. I found mine, apartment 3, B. The numbers were spinning fast, impossibly fast. I could hear the click, click, click of the dial. I shined my phone's flashlight on the wiring. There it was. A crude splitter, barely wrapped in electrical tape, siphoning power from my line to the hallway lights, and I was sure, Miklos' own apartment on the first floor. He was vulture billing the whole building. I held my phone up. The camera flashed stark and bright. I took a picture of the meter. I took a picture of the illegal splitter. I took a picture of the serial number. It was the only leverage I had against him, and it had never been enough. I crept back to my door, my heart still racing from the alley, from the money, from the cold. There, on the filthy doormat, was a plain white envelope. It hadn't been there when I came in. I knew it. I would have stepped on it. Someone had been here in the 3 minutes I was in the utility closet. My breath caught. I nudged it with my toe. It was thin, not bulky, not a bomb, just paper. I snatched it up, locked my door again, and leaned against the wood, my heart hammering. There was no name, no address, just 3B written in a blocky, unfamiliar hand. Inside was a single piece of cheap printer paper. The words were cut from a newspaper or magazine, glued like in a bad movie. Stay away from Bay 9 if you want your mother's treatment to continue. Bay 9. The same words those two fake compliance officers had used in the alley. This wasn't a warning. It was a threat, and it connected the men in the alley directly to my mother. My stomach twisted. A mix of bile and terror. They knew where I lived. They knew about my mother. I spent the rest of the night on the futon, fully dressed, my coat still on, the $10,000 clutched in my backpack on my lap. I didn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every siren in the distance made me jump. At 6:15 in the morning, I left. I paid for another cab to North Vale Mercy East, the hospital on the other side of the river. The $10,000 was still in my bag, minus the cab fares. I paid for my mother's emergency treatment in cash, $400. The admissions nurse didn't blink. She just ran the bills through her counter and handed me a receipt. I went up to the dialysis ward. The room was beige and smelled of antiseptic and warm blankets. My mother was already hooked up to the machine, her eyes closed. She was so pale, her skin like tissue paper. Ava. She opened her eyes, a weak smile finding her lips. You're here. I told you I'd be here. Mom. I kissed her forehead. It was cool and damp. You look exhausted, honey. Is everything okay at the restaurant? I forced a smile. Everything's fine. Tips were great. The lie tasted like ash. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Ava, I know things are hard. I know I'm expensive. Mom, don't ever say that. But I mean it. I saw you looking at that flyer, the one for the short-term loans, the one with the one-day approval. My blood ran cold. I'd torn that flyer down from the community board in our lobby. I'd thrown it out. She must have seen it in my trash. Don't you dare, Ava, she whispered, her eyes sharp, focused. You don't borrow from those people, not the underground lenders. Not ever. It's not worth it. I'd rather miss a treatment than have you tangled up with them. Promise me. I promise. Mom, I said, my voice thick. I'm not tangled up in anything. I got in advance. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. She closed her eyes again. Good. You're a good daughter. Just be smart. Smarter than your father was. I sat with her until the cycle was finished. The $10,000 feeling less like a lifeline and more like bait. This was moolah, the kind that comes with strings. This was exactly what my mother was warning me against, and I had already taken it. I got back to my apartment just after noon. The building was quiet. I was so tired I could barely see straight. All I wanted was to lock the door, barricade it with my chair, and sleep for a week. I passed the laundry room in the basement. A sharp zzz crack sound, followed by the smell of ozone, stopped me. One of the ancient washing machines was sparking, a small, ugly blue flame licking up from the control panel. Damn it, Miklos, I muttered. Problem with the machine. I jumped, spinning around. A man I'd never seen before was standing in the shadows by the boiler. He was wearing greasy blue coveralls and holding a heavy toolbox. He was big, with a thick neck and small, watchful eyes. It's sparking, I said, backing toward the stairs. Yeah, I see that. Landlord sent me. Miklos said the whole building's wiring is shot. He took a step toward me. Said to check the junction boxes in the apartments. Yours is 3B. Right, I can start with yours. It was the middle of the day. He had a toolbox. He knew Miklos. It should have been fine. It was not fine. It's not a good time, I said, my hand tightening on my bag. I'm sick. It'll only take a minute, he said, his voice a little too friendly, a little too insistent. He started walking toward the stairs, toward me. Just need to check the breaker panel in your closet. He knew where my breaker panel was. No, I said, my voice firm. I'll call Miklos and reschedule. His smile faded. He said to do it now. He said you'd be home. I didn't wait. I ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. I heard his heavy boots on the concrete steps behind me. Hey, wait. I just need to... I slammed my apartment door, threw the deadbolt, and jammed my only solid chair under the doorknob. My heart was going to burst out of my chest. A moment later, a heavy fist pounded on the door. Boom, boom, boom. Ma'am, I'm the repairman. You gotta let me check the wiring. It's a fire hazard. I scrambled to the peephole. His face was distorted, his small eyes staring right at the lens. He wasn't a repairman. He was a thug. He was here for the money. Or for me. I stayed silent, my back pressed to the wall, holding my breath. He knocked again, harder, then silence. I stayed at the peephole, shaking, until I saw him stomp back down the hall. My phone buzzed in my hand, a text from an unknown number. Leave your bag by the mailboxes. Walk away. Pick it up in the morning. It was followed by a single emoji, a black raven. Silas Voss. This was his man. This was his instruction. My bag. The bag with $10,000 in it. I looked at my door. The chair was still wedged. The fake repairman was probably a warning. The text was the solution. I couldn't just leave $10,000 in a lobby, but I also couldn't keep it. It was painting a target on my back. I typed a reply. Who is this? No response. I waited until I was sure the hallway was clear. I didn't leave the bag. I was terrified. At 3 a.m, unable to sleep, I crept downstairs. The lobby was empty. I checked my mailbox. 3B. Nothing. But my backpack was sitting next to the mailboxes, the one I was wearing, the one that was currently on my back. The text hadn't been a question. It had been a prediction. Leave your bag. I slowly unzipped the main compartment. The $10,000 was gone. My stomach dropped, but it was replaced by a strange, cold relief. It was over. He'd taken the money back. I was out. But my fingers brushed something else, a small, laminated card and a single, folded piece of paper. I pulled them out. The card was a temporary employee ID. My name, Ava Linwood, was printed on it. My photo, my driver's license photo, was on it. How did he get that? The company name was Vanguard Portage. The note was simple, typewritten. Be at this address by 10 p.m. Your title is night receptionist. Your shift ends at 6 a.m. You will sit at the desk. You will answer the phone. You will say exactly this, Vanguard Portage. How may I assist you? You will write down everything else. An address was printed at the bottom. It was down by the docks, the bad part of the docks. This wasn't an escape. This was an assignment. He hadn't taken the money back. He had just collected his first payment. My laptop was old, but the building's shared Wi-Fi was just barely usable. I searched for Vanguard Portage. Nothing. No website, no official records. Then I tried the building's internal tenant forum, a place usually reserved for complaining about Miklos and selling broken furniture. I searched Vanguard Portage. One hit, from 6 months ago, a user named Dockwatcher had posted, anyone know what Vanguard Portage is, saw their trucks by Lockridge Bridge. Looks like a front, all cash for container fees. Smells fishy. A front, a shell company for collecting cash for container fees. Silas Voss's company. I held the laminated ID. It felt cold, heavy. I could tear it up. I could throw it away. I could take my mother and run. Where with what? The $63 I had before all this. My phone rang. It was the hospital. My heart seized. Miss Linwood, a crisp, administrative voice said, we're just calling to update our patient billing. Due to a new carrier agreement, we've had a significant increase in the projected cost for your mother's ongoing renal care. The co-payment structure will be increasing by 40%, effective immediately. 40%? I was staring at the Vanguard Portage ID card. I felt utterly, completely trapped. Miss Linwood, did you hear me? Yes, I said, my voice hollow. I heard you. I'll handle it. It's not a problem. I hung up. I looked out my window at the gray, unforgiving sky over Northvale. As I watched, A tiny red light, a pinprick, appeared on the wall opposite my window. It danced for a second, then settled on my chest. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my heart. It wasn't a laser, it was a drone. A small, black, toy-like drone, hovering just outside my third-floor window, its camera lens pointing right at me. It hovered for a second, a silent, mechanical wasp, then zipped away, disappearing over the roof. They were watching me. They knew I got the card. They knew the hospital had called. My hands were shaking again. I picked up my phone and dialed the unknown number, the one that had sent the raven emoji. It rang once. Someone picked up. I didn't hear breathing. I heard static, the faint, distant sound of a scratched vinyl record, playing a sad, slow piano tune. Just hiss and old music. "Hello?" I whispered. "Who is this?" No one spoke. The music just played, a ghost on the line. After 30 seconds, they hung up. I stood in the center of my cold, small room. I was fired, I was threatened, I was being watched, and my mother was sick. I looked at the ID card, Vanguard Portage. I took a deep breath, the cold air burning my lungs. I put on my gray wool coat, the one with the missing button. I grabbed my keys. I was going to the address. I wasn't going to work. I was just going to go there and tell them, face to face, that I wanted no part of this. I was going to refuse directly. It was the only lie I had left to tell myself. My lie about refusing felt thin and stupid as the cab crossed the Lockridge Bridge. The address on the ID card wasn't just near the docks. It was in them. The cab driver didn't even slow down, just grunted and pointed at a red brick warehouse hunched in the shadow of the bridge. "That's Vanguard. You're paying in cash." "Right." I paid him and stepped out. The air wasn't just cold. It was wet. It smelled of the river, but not the river by the Rook and Raven. This was the industrial gut of North Vale. It smelled like rust, diesel fumes, and stagnant water. Above me, the Lockridge thrummed as a truck passed, shaking dust from its iron girders, and beneath that, a constant, high-pitched screechy, the sound of container trains moving on the tracks right next to the building. Vanguard Portage. The sign was new, but the building was ancient. It was a massive, dark red brick rectangle, its windows opaque with grime. I pushed open a heavy steel door marked office and stepped inside. The difference was immediate. The air inside was dry, cold and dead silent. The industrial noise from outside was muted, as if the walls were a foot thick. I was standing in a reception area, but it was empty. Utterly empty. A single, long counter made of dark, scarred wood stretched across the room. Behind it, a wall was covered by a massive shipping schedule, a grid of numbers and ports. It was laminated, but it was pockmarked, dotted with small, dark holes, dents, and punctures that looked old, like someone had thrown darts at it, or worse. There was no chair, no computer, no welcome mat, just the counter, the damaged map, and a single old-fashioned black telephone. In the corner of the ceiling, a smoked black camera dome, a perfect half-sphere, aimed directly at me. It was a shark's eye, unblinking. A door behind the counter buzzed open. Not a friendly buzz, a sharp, electrical snap. I hadn't seen the door. It was set flush into the wall, painted the same drab gray. Beyond it was a hallway, and at the end of that hallway, a glass-walled office. Silas Voss was sitting behind a desk. He wasn't looking at me, and he was looking down at a heavy, leather-bound book like an old ship's log, turning the pages slowly with one hand. The light from his desk lamp glinted off the black fountain pen in his other hand. He didn't have a computer either. I walked the length of the empty room, my footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floor. The silence felt like pressure. I pushed open the glass door. He looked up. His gray eyes were just as flat and unreadable as they had been at the restaurant. "You're late," he said. "It was 9:58 p.m. I came here to tell you." My lie died in my throat. The words sounded ridiculous in this place. He closed the logbook. "You came here to refuse. I know. You were rehearsing the speech in the cab. My mouth went dry. The camera, the cab, he knew. The bill last night, he said, steepling his fingers. The $2,480 mistake, that was a test, Miss Linwood. A test to see what you would do. If you'd cry, if you'd grovel, if you'd get angry. You did none of them, you just froze. You accepted it. He leaned forward slightly. Then I had $10,000 placed in your apron. Another test. Would you run? Would you go to the police? Would you try to spend it all in one night? You had me fired, I whispered, the anger suddenly sharp. Kurt Danner fired you, because he's a weak man who panics. I merely applied pressure. He shrugged, a minimal movement. You took the money home. You used it to pay for your mother's care. You documented your landlord's fraud, and when two men, who were not from urban compliance, threatened you, you didn't scream, you didn't run, you just looked for an exit. And the drone the fake repairman, tests, he said simply, to see if you would break. You didn't. You're still here. He slid a single piece of paper across the desk. This is why you're here. It wasn't a job application. It was a contract, a personal protection agreement. At the top, the Voss Consortium Protector and Ava Linwood Protected Party. I scanned the terms. It was dense legal language, but one clause stood out, practically glowing. The protected party is hereby rendered immune from all non-federal, non-judicial debt collection actions, including, but not limited to, eviction notices, utility shutoffs, and medical billing inquiries. It was a shield. It would stop Miklos. It would stop the hospital and their 40% increase. It would stop all of it. In exchange, Silas continued, as if reading my thoughts, you will manage the night desk. You will sit at that counter. He pointed to the empty room. You will be here for 2 weeks. That is the term of the agreement. 2 weeks. What do I do? You do what the note said. You answer the phone. You will get calls. Some will be truckers. Some will be other people. But you will pay attention to one caller only, the Interstate Trade Bureau. The name sounded official, federal. They are investigating, he said, choosing the word carefully. They are attempting to disrupt my business. They are looking for leverage. They are looking for a weakness. I looked at him, and it clicked. I was the weakness. Or rather, my cleanness was the buffer. You're being audited, I said. A flicker of that cold, sharp smile, of a sort. They are looking for a way in. They want my shipping logs. They want to tie my legitimate business to other enterprises, but they cannot get access without cause. So they fish. They try to trap my employees. And you want me to talk to them. I want you to be the only one who talks to them. You are a new hire. You are a former waitress with a sick mother. You have no criminal record. You are, for all legal purposes, perfectly, beautifully clean. You cannot be implicated because you know nothing. You are the perfect firewall. I can't, I said, my voice trembling. I don't want to be involved. Silas Voss stood up. He walked around the desk until he was standing in front of me. He was close, but not touching me. He just loomed. You are already involved, Miss Linwood, he said, his voice dropping to that quiet rumble. You were involved the moment those men in the alley mentioned Bay 9. You were involved the moment that note was slid under your door. You think they will leave you alone if you walk out of here. You think they'll forget about your mother's treatment schedule. He was right. I was trapped. Walking away meant facing them alone. Staying meant this. As if on cue, the black telephone on the empty reception desk shrieked. It was a jarring, old-fashioned brrring that echoed in the huge, empty room. I jumped. Silas didn't flinch. There's your first one, he said. What do I do? You answer it. Use the words. The phone rang again, demanding. I walked out of his office, my legs feeling like wood, and stood behind the massive counter. I looked at the phone. It was heavy, black bakelite. I picked up the receiver. Vanguard Portage, I said, my voice shaking. How may I assist you? A woman's voice, crisp and professional. This is Agent Riley with the Interstate Trade Bureau, badge 774. I'm calling to request the immediate arrival schedule and manifest for container 7HKNL. My blood went cold. It was them, already, on my first night, my first minute. I looked back through the glass. Silas was watching me. I put my hand over the receiver. "It's them," I mouthed, terrified. "She wants a container schedule on 7HKNL. Silas watched me. He didn't move, except for the barest, slowest shake of his head. No. I took my hand off the receiver. My mind was racing. I couldn't give her the information. I couldn't hang up. "Ma'am," I said, trying to sound bored, like a receptionist. "I'm sorry, I'm new. That sounds like a formal records request. You'll need to submit that through the internal portal." There was a half-second of silence. "The portal. There is no portal. I'm an agent with the Trade Bureau. I can only forward portal requests," I said, cutting her off, the words tasting like metal. "Thank you for calling Vanguard." I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking so badly I couldn't let go of the receiver. I stood there, gripping it, my knuckles white. I had done it. I had lied to a federal agent. I had crossed the line. The glass door of the office clicked open. Silas walked out, stopping a few feet away. He looked at the phone, then at me. "Good," he said. He reached into his pocket and tossed a small, brass key onto the counter. It skidded across the wood. "There's a metal locker in the break room," he said. "Your name is on it. Inside. You'll find a heavy coat, insulated boots, a thermos for coffee, and a can of pepper gel. Keep the gel on you. The coat, too. It gets cold out here by 4 a.m. He started to walk back to his office. "Wait." The word just came out. He stopped, turning. "Why me?" I asked, the question hollow. "You have hundreds of men on the docks, men in suits. Why pick me a waitress?" He studied me for a long time. The only sound was the low hum of the ballast in the ceiling lights. "Because of the restaurant," he said, his voice quiet. "When you spilled the water, you froze. When you gave me the wrong bill, you froze. When those men cornered you in the alley, you froze. You were terrified, visibly shaking. But you didn't cry. You didn't beg. You didn't run." He took a step closer. "Most people in this city are either predators or prey. They fight or they flee. You just stand still. You know how to be scared and not move. That's rare. And right now, that's exactly what I need." He turned and walked back into his glass box. Shutting the door, he sat down and opened his logbook, the pen back in his hand, as if I had already disappeared. I was alone again, in the vast, empty room. I looked at the key. I looked at the black telephone. Outside, a train whistle wailed, long and low, cutting through the damp night. It didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like the growl of a vast, empty stomach. The city was hungry, and I was what it was being fed. My first shift at Vanguard Portage was 8 hours of pure, distilled silence. The phone rang 3 times, twice. It was a long-haul trucker confirming a drop-off time. The 3rd time was Agent Riley from the Trade Bureau, her voice tighter this time. "I'm trying to locate the portal you mentioned," she said, the lie sharp. "I'm sorry, ma'am," I recited, my voice a flat, bored monotone. "I can only forward portal requests." She hung up without another word. Silas Voss stayed in his glass office until 2 in the morning, writing in his logbook. He never looked up. Then he simply stood, put on his coat, and left without a word. I was alone in the warehouse by the river, with the insulated coat from the locker, a can of pepper gel that felt heavy in my pocket, and the screaming trains. The second night, the phone rang just after midnight. "Vanguard, how may I assist you?" "Yeah, look, I need to speak to logistics. Now." The voice was panicked, wheezing, and horribly familiar. "This is Danner, Kurt Danner, from the Rook and Raven." My blood froze. "I'm sorry, sir. I can only forward portal." "Shut up with the portal," he hissed. You tell whoever is there that the route for container 44B is compromised. The one heading to the rail spur. They know. Ellison's people know. I did my part. I'm out." The line clicked dead. I sat there, my hand frozen on the receiver, Kurt, my old manager, leaking routes, a name, Ellison. I wrote it all down on the notepad, exactly as I'd heard. When Silas arrived an hour later, I passed him the note. He read it, his face showing nothing. He just nodded, folded the paper, and put it in his breast pocket. He didn't say a word about it. The next morning, I went to check on my mother before my shift. She was sitting up in bed, looking agitated. "Ava, what is this?" she asked. She was holding her phone. "I got an email. I don't know the sender." She turned the phone so I could see it. It was a picture, a grainy, dark photo taken from a distance. It was me, standing outside the Vanguard warehouse, under the single, sickly yellow security light. Beneath it, a single line of text, "Your daughter picked a side." "Ava, where was this taken?" my mother demanded, her voice rising in fear. "What is this? Is this about the money I told you not to take that money?" "It's just a new job. Mom, it's night security. It's nothing." I tried to sound calm, but my insides were water. They had found my mother. They were watching both of us. "It doesn't look like nothing. Ava, it looks like the docks." I left the hospital shaking with a new, colder fury. When I got back to Greystone 12, I saw Miklos Arden. He was in the lobby, but he wasn't fixing the radiator. He was by the mailboxes, sorting through the large recycling bin, pulling out tenants' discarded mail. He was looking for something. He was looking for my protection contract, the one I didn't have, the one Silas had only shown me. He was looking for proof of who I was involved with. I didn't hesitate. I stood on the staircase, just out of his sight, and took 2 pictures with my phone. The flash was off. I pulled up the contact information Silas had given me, the one in the locker, Rowan Slate, rescue. It was just a number. I texted the photos of Miklos to the number, adding the simple message, "Landlord, Greystone 12, harassment." My phone buzzed almost instantly, a reply from Rowan Slate, one word, "Understood." That night, Silas was at the warehouse when I arrived. He was standing at the big, pockmarked shipping map, not in his office. He appeared out of the shadows like he was made of them. He smelled faintly of expensive wool and mint. "Did you know a man named Cade Ellison at the restaurant?" he asked. No greeting. I stiffened. Kurt's phone call. No, I never heard that name. He was a regular, sat with the city councilman, liked his steak rare. Silas tapped the map, his finger landing on Bay 9. "He's been misplacing my property." He looked at me. "Your old manager, Kurt, was one of his. We've handled Mr. Danner. He won't be calling again." Handled. The word hung in the cold, dead air. I didn't ask. Silas turned to leave, then paused. "From now on, you'll see manifests on your desk for the assemblage art. You'll log them into the book. That's all." For the next week, my life fell into a terrifying rhythm. Sleep from noon to 8 p.m., clinging to my futon, cab to the hospital, an hour with my mother, lying to her, telling her my night receptionist job was boring, cab to the docks, 8 hours of silence, broken by the phone and the trains. And the manifests, they were for assemblage art, just as he'd said, shipping containers full of sculptures, destined for galleries in Chicago, Miami, even overseas. But the shipping weights were enormous, and the client notes were strange, requesting climate-controlled, high-amperage power for sculptures. On the 5th night, I saw an invoice that had slipped from a folder. It wasn't for art, it was for custom computing modules, thousands of them. I typed the name of the recipient company, Halcyon Gray, into my phone. The search results were all tech blogs and dark web forums. Halcyon Gray, a phantom tech collective, rumored to be the largest illegal crypto mining operation in the Midwest. They weren't shipping art, they were shipping massive, power-hungry computer rigs to steal electricity and mine cryptocurrency. And Silas Voss was moving their hardware, or he had been Cade Ellison, Bay 9. This was a war over a criminal enterprise. I was logging these manifests. My name, in my handwriting, was in the logbook. I was an accessory. I was standing by the open warehouse bay door, trying to get the smell of diesel out of my nose, my mind spinning, when it happened. Crack! It wasn't a firecracker. It was sharp, high velocity. A split second later, a ping, as a piece of the steel siding a foot from my head deformed. A silver dollar of metal ripped clean. I didn't even have time to scream. Silas moved. He was in his office 1 second, and the next his hand was on the back of my neck, his body slamming me against the concrete wall, shielding me. "Don't move," he breathed. His voice was perfectly calm. His breath was cold, but his hand was a vice, hot and heavy on my skin, pinning me to the spot. He looked up at the roof of the opposite warehouse. 1 shooter, high-powered, just a warning. He kept me pinned there for a full minute, listening. The only sound was my own heart, which felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my back. He wasn't even breathing hard. "Rowan's here," he said, speaking into his cuff. "Rooftop, warehouse 4. Scan it." He finally let me go. I sagged against the wall, my legs gone. "Halcyon is getting impatient, he said, brushing a speck of dust from his sleeve. "They don't like that we've stopped their shipments. They tried to kill me." "No," he said, turning his cold gaze on me. "If they wanted you gone, you'd be gone. That was a message. For me." The very next day, the Northvale Ledger's website ran a story, an anonymous tip. Local philanthropist or waterfront wolf sources allege Voss Consortium using Silver Pardon charity to launder illicit funds. Silver Pardon. I knew that name. It was the biggest, cleanest charity in the city. They funded hospitals. They funded the arts. Halcyon Gray wasn't just using bullets. They were using the press. They were attacking his legitimate front. That was my breaking point. Bullets, crypto, federal agents, but this was different. They were painting him as a monster, and my mother's life depended on a man who was now toxic. I went to Vanguard that night with my resignation speech ready, the real one this time. "I can't," I said, before he could even sit down. "I'm out, the bullet, the newspapers. My mother, I'm taking her, and I'm leaving Northvale." Silas just watched me, letting my panic fill the room. When I was finished, my chest heaving, he slid a file across his desk. It wasn't a contract. It was my mother's medical file. "You're right," he said. "Halcyon is attacking the Silver Pardon Fund. They're trying to freeze its assets, which would be a problem for your mother." I opened the file. My hands were shaking. It was a letter from Northvale Mercy East, dated 3 days ago. It was a notification of a new benefactor. My mother's treatments, all of them, past and future, were being covered. The 40% increase was gone. In fact, all of it was gone. At the bottom of the letterhead was a small, embossed stamp, funded by the Silver Pardon Foundation. "The hospital called you about the increase," he said, "because Halcyon was already squeezing them. I squeezed back. I've been funding that dialysis wing for 5 years. It's clean money. Miss Linwood, check it, trace it. It's the cleanest money in this city. They're trying to burn my reputation so they can take my territory, but they won't, and they won't touch your mother." I stared at the paper. He had paid for it all. He had done it before the warning shot, before the news article. He had anticipated it. I wanted to run, but where would I run to? He had just given my mother back her life. The news broke at 4 a.m. I saw it on my phone. Fire at Greystone 12. Suspicious. My blood evaporated. I called my mother. No answer. I called her again. No answer. I ran out of the office. "My apartment. My mother, she's not..." The black sedan was already at the curb. The door was open. Silas was in the back seat. "Get in!" I fell into the car. "My mother, is she..." "She's fine," he said, his voice flat as the car sped through the dark streets. "The fire wasn't in your apartment. It was next door. Apartment 3. C, a warning, an escalation. But she was at the hospital. They knew she was there. This was for you, to show you they can get into your building, that they can get close." The car didn't go to Greystone. It didn't go to Northvale Mercy East. It pulled up to a sleek glass and steel building on the rich side of town. The sign was discreet. Glowing silver, Linwood Riverside Kidney Center. "What is this?" I whispered. "This is a private clinic. My clinic. Rowan Slate moved your mother here 2 hours ago. As soon as the fire was reported, she's safe. She has a private room. The best doctors. They'll be waiting for her when she wakes up." He got out of the car. I followed him, numb. We stood in the pristine, silent lobby. Through a set of double-glass doors, I could see the nurses' station, and just beyond it, a private room. My mother was asleep in a comfortable bed, not a hospital cot. A warm, clean blanket was pulled up to her chin. She looked peaceful. Silas didn't go in. He just stood there, in the lobby, watching her through 2 panes of glass. He looked at her like she was an asset, a piece on his board he had just moved to safety. He saw that she was secure. He nodded once, to himself. He turned to me. "She'll be safe here. No one will find her. No one will touch her. I've personally guaranteed her treatment, for as long as it takes." He didn't ask for anything. He didn't tell me I owed him. He just stated a fact. I stood there, torn in half. One half of me was sick with terror, tangled in a war between criminals. The other half was flooded with a desperate, toxic gratitude. He was a monster. He was the darkness. But he had just saved my mother's life. He had built a fortress around the only person I had. "Go on," he said, his voice softer, almost gentle. "She'll be waking up soon." He turned and walked out of the clinic, leaving me in the bright, sterile light, his promise hanging in the air. My mother was safe. That one fact changed the entire chemical composition of my fear. It didn't make it go away, but it cooled it, hardened it from a frantic, splashing panic into a solid, cold block of ice. I still felt it, but I could hold it. I could think around it. When I returned to Vanguard that night, the warehouse felt different. It felt like my territory. Silas was there, not in his office, but standing by the scarred wooden counter, waiting for me. "She's comfortable," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, thank you." Gratitude is a luxury. "Miss Linwood, we're in a tactical phase." He tapped the counter. "Halcyon Gray, the group that shot at you, is run by Cade Ellison, the man Kurt Danner was reporting to. Ellison is a problem. He's reckless. The fire, the press leak, these are the moves of a man losing his grip, not tightening it." He outlined it like a general. "We are opening a 3-front engagement. First, we cut off the information. Mr. Danner is a loose thread." "You handled him," I said, remembering his words. "We contained him. Now we need him to sing the right song. Second, your landlord, Miklos Arden." "What about him?" "He's a low-level irritant, but he's sniffing around. Rowan Slate will provide a permanent solution. You will be the face of it. Third and most important, Cade Ellison. He's insulated. He doesn't show his face. We need to flush him." He looked at me, and I realized this wasn't just a briefing. This was an assignment. "He's watching you," Silas said. "The fire, the news story, he thinks you're my weakness, my new, vulnerable asset. He's wrong. You're my bait." "What do you want me to do?" My voice was steady. "There's a private forum for dock workers and logistics crew, the North Vale Signal. You're going to post that you're looking for someone to cover your night shift, a family emergency. You'll imply you're desperate and willing to pay cash. He'll know it's me." "He'll think he knows what it is," Silas corrected. "He'll see a new, scared receptionist who wants to run. He'll want to buy your shift. He'll send someone to grab your replacement or you to get leverage, and we will be waiting." I posted it. My fingers typed the lie, my heart a slow, heavy drum. "Need cover, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift, Vanguard portage, pay cash, family sick, please DM." The next move came not from Halcyon, but from the government. The black phone rang at 10:30 p.m. It was Agent Riley. I was so prepared for her script that hers caught me off guard. "Miss Linwood," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "This is a formal notification. The Interstate Trade Bureau is conducting an unscheduled site inspection of Vanguard Portage. We have a warrant. Our team will be on site in approximately 30 minutes. I looked at the glass office. Silas was gone. He hadn't even come in. I'm just the receptionist, I stammered. There's no one here. We'll see you in 30, she said, and hung up. I called Silas's private number. He answered on the first ring. Not a trace of alarm in his voice. I could hear classical music and the faint clink of porcelain. They're coming here, I said, my voice tight. A raid. Agent Riley. 30 minutes. They are, he said calmly, and they will find an empty warehouse and a very polite, very new receptionist. You will let them in. You will answer their questions with, I don't know, I just started. And you will give them this number. He texted me a number. It's my counsel. Tell them I am currently in a meeting and my lawyer will handle all inquiries. A meeting, Silas? They have a warrant. Yes. I'm meeting with 2 city councilmen and the director of the Port Authority at the Montclair Club about my charitable contributions to the city's new infrastructure bond. A pause. They can't inspect my legitimate business while I'm publicly engaged in more legitimate business. It looks aggressive. They'll back off. And they did. The ITB team arrived. 4 of them, all sharp suits and sharper eyes. They were clearly annoyed. I gave them the line. I gave them the number. I watched Agent Riley's face tighten as she spoke to the lawyer. She and her team looked at the assemblage art manifests. But without a guide, the papers meant nothing. They left after an hour, empty-handed and furious. Silas had turned their surprise attack into a demonstration of his own legitimacy. He'd used his alibi like a shield. The next day, it was time for prong 2. Miklos. I walked into the lobby of Greystone 12 at 6 p.m. Peak time. Miklos was there, scrubbing graffiti off the mailboxes. You, he snarled when he saw me. You still owe me for last month, and I hear you're out of a job. Locks are changing tomorrow. I didn't say anything. I just pulled out my phone. I opened the Tenant Forum app and hit live audio stream. This is Ava Linwood in 3B, I said, my voice echoing in the small, tiled lobby. I'm in the lobby with Mr. Arden. I'm streaming this to everyone in the building. For the last year, Mr. Arden has been illegally splitting our electric meters. I have photographs of the tampered junction box. He has overcharged this building by, I estimate, at least 30%. What is this? Miklos sputtered, his face turning purple. That's slander, that's your crazy. I have a document here, I said, pulling a piece of paper from my coat. Silas had given it to me. It was a full refund calculation for every unit. It's an agreement to refund all overcharged utility fees, effective immediately, in exchange for the tenants agreeing not to pursue a class action lawsuit. I'm not signing anything, he yelled, lunging for the phone. A man stepped out of the stairwell. He was tall, thin, and wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, but he moved with a silence that was terrifying. He was the ghost I'd only heard of, Rowan Slate. He didn't touch Miklos. He just stood between us, holding a sleek, modern pen. He just looked at him. Miklos froze. He looked at the live stream on my phone. He looked at the unblinking, dead calm stare of Rowan Slate. He looked at the paper. He snatched the pen from Rowan's hand, his own shaking violently. He signed it, smearing the ink. Rowan Slate took the paper, folded it, and handed it to me. He looked at Miklos one time. It is understood, he said. His voice was a dry rasp, like stones scraping together. Then he was gone, out the front door, vanishing into the twilight. Prong 2 was closed. Prong 3 closed itself. 2 days later, the news reported that Kurt Danner had been arrested. He tried to buy a bus ticket to Chicago with a stack of counterfeit $100 bills. The bills, the report noted, were marked with a faint fluorescent dye, visible only under UV light. He immediately confessed, naming his supplier Cade Ellison. It was a clean, perfect checkmate. Silas had fed him the fake money, knowing he'd run, knowing he'd be caught, and knowing he'd talk. Halcyon was backed into a corner, and they lashed out. My phone lit up with a message from an old friend from the restaurant. Ava, oh my God, what is this? Are you okay? It was a link to a video on a local gossip site. The headline, Rook and Raven Waitress caught in Voss Consortium payoff. My heart stopped. I clicked it. It was grainy, dark footage. From the alley, it was me, and a man I didn't recognize, one of Silas's men. He was handing me my backpack. The video was edited, choppy, with no audio, but the implication was clear. It was cut to look like a payoff. Me, taking a bag full of cash, just moments before Silas's car appeared. I was being painted as a criminal, an informant. I felt sick. I was going to be arrested. My mother. I called Silas, my voice shaking. They put up a video of me. It looks like I'm taking a bribe. I know, he said. He was calm. Stay off the internet. Watch Channel 4 at 11. He hung up. I waited, my stomach in knots. At 11, the local news lead story. Developing story on the North Vale waterfront. And there he was, Silas Voss. He wasn't hiding. He was standing on the steps of the Montclair Club, a bank of microphones in his face. He looked impeccable. He looked bored. Mr. Voss, a reporter shouted, can you comment on the video implicating your associate, Ava Linwood, in a cash payoff? Silas leaned into the microphone. I can, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. Miss Linwood is not my associate. She is a witness I am protecting. The night that video was taken, she was harassed in an alley by two men impersonating city officials, attempting to gain information about my business. The reporter scribbled frantically. The footage you've seen, Silas continued, his voice dripping with bored authority, shows my security detail returning her personal effects. We subsequently retained her services to provide testimony. The $10,000 you're all so curious about, it was a witness protection retainer, paid from the Silver Pardon Fund, for her relocation and her family's medical care. It's all fully documented. A reporter shouted, So you're saying she's a protected witness? I'm saying, Silas said, looking directly into the camera, that I keep my word and I protect my people. Any further questions can be directed to my counsel. He turned and walked back into the club. I sat on my futon, stunned. He hadn't denied it. He'd confirmed it. He'd taken their weapon, their accusation, and forged it into a shield. He'd wrapped me in a cloak of legitimacy. I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't a mole. I was a protected witness. He had given me a legal identity that made me untouchable. The rumors died overnight. The story shifted. Silas Voss, the ruthless waterfront wolf, was now Silas Voss, the man who keeps his word. His reputation on the street and in the press solidified. I went to Vanguard that night with a new understanding. I wasn't just bait. I was a piece on the board, a bishop protected by the king. The final move came at 3 a.m, a new text, an unknown number. I hear you're the one to talk to, the lady with the protected word. I'm tired of my people getting handled. Let's clear the air. Just you and me, Dovetail Ice Rink. Midnight tomorrow. Come alone. We'll talk about Bay 9. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. Cade Ellison. I showed the phone to Silas. He was back in his glass office, watching the snow fall over the dark river. He read the message. He looked up at me. He didn't order me. He just waited. It's a trap, I said. Obviously, he replied. He wants you as leverage. He's desperate, but it's also the first time he's shown his face. It's your choice. I thought of my mother, safe in her clean, warm room. I thought of Miklos's face when he signed that paper. I thought of the bullet hitting the steel. I'll go, I said. Silas nodded, as if I'd just confirmed a shipping time. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small, flat device, a wire. You won't be alone, he said. You'll wear this. Rowan will be on overwatch, on the roof. I will be in the shadows, behind you. He handed me the wire. It was cold to the touch. If he has more than one man, if he shows a weapon, if you feel for 1 second that it's wrong, you just say one thing. What? You say, the night's getting cold. He looked me in the eyes. If you say those words, Ava, everything goes dark. The meeting with Ellison was set for the following night, 24 hours. It hung in the air, a thick black cloud waiting to break. I arrived at Vanguard at the usual time. Just before 10 p.m., the wire felt cold and alien, taped beneath my shirt. I was expecting Silas to be in his glass office, tactical, cold, ready for the final briefing. Instead, he was waiting for me by the steel door, wearing his heavy wool overcoat. "Not tonight," he said. His voice was quiet. "We're not opening the office." I stopped, my hand on my bag. What's wrong? Did he change the time? "No, the meeting is tomorrow. Tonight you need to understand why you're walking into that ice rink." He didn't lead me to his car. He led me past the warehouse, toward the dark, churning water of the river. The wind was brutal, cutting straight through my coat. He walked down a rickety, unsecured pier I had never noticed, hidden behind a mountain of rusted, empty containers. At the end of the pier, chained to a massive iron cleat, was a long, flat river barge. It was dark, silent, its deck slick with icy rain. It looked abandoned. Silas produced a key and unlocked the heavy steel door to the barge's wheelhouse. He pushed it open and held it for me. I stepped inside. The air was still and surprisingly warm. The tiny cabin was clean, Spartan. It smelled of cedar, old paper charts, and the faint, familiar scent of mint. This wasn't a front. This wasn't a business. This was his... The only light came from the glow of the container port across the river, casting long, shifting shadows. The sound was different, too. The city's roar was gone, replaced by the low, rhythmic groaning of the barge against the pier and the deep, hollow thrum of the Lockridge Bridge high above us. It was the only quiet place in Northvale. He didn't turn on a light. He just stood by the thick glass windows, looking out at the black water. "You asked me why I chose you," he said, his voice low, blending with the river's sound. "I told you it was because you know how to be scared and not move. That was the truth. But it's not the whole truth." He was silent for a long moment, watching the lights dance on the water. "I know how, too," he whispered. "I grew up in Merrow Park, before they tore it down for the new port extension. I knew Merrow Park. Everyone did. It wasn't just the bad part of town. It was the forgotten part, a collection of temporary housing units that had become permanent, rotting tombs. My father worked the docks," he continued, his back still to me, "until the union collapsed and the new management took over. Then he just broke. He'd lost his job, he was sick, and he owed money. The kind of men who don't take payment plans. I didn't learn to count in school. I learned to count by the red serial numbers on the containers passing the rail yard, trying to figure out which ones my father had failed to unload." His voice was flat, a recitation of old facts. When he couldn't pay, they came. They took everything, the television, my mother's wedding ring. Finally, they took the cot I slept on, just carried it out while my father watched. He died 6 months later. He turned from the window, in the dim, blue light. His gray eyes weren't flat, they were deep, holding an ancient, cold anger. I stood in that empty room and I made a vow. No one, not me, not anyone I could reach, would ever be crushed just for being poor again. Not if I had the strength to stop it. The Silver Pardon Fund, the clinic, that's my wall against that. He looked at me, the connection snapping into place. Ellison and Halcyon, they're not just competitors, they're them. They're the men who took my cot. They prey on the weak. They use desperate people like Kurt Danner. They bleed tenants dry like Miklos Arden. They are the rot. That's why I can't just let them go. That's why I can't let them have Bay 9. It's not about money. It's about the line. My own fears, which had felt so massive, so suffocating, suddenly felt shared. He wasn't a monster. He was a survivor, just like me. He had just built better armor. "I'm afraid of sirens," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. He stilled, listening. "Ambulance sirens, mostly," I continued, my voice trembling. "For the last 2 years, every time I hear one, my world just stops. My heart, my breath, I think this is it. It's for her. I think her kidneys have finally failed, that the machine stopped, that I'm too late, that I was halfway across town serving champagne to rich people while she... I couldn't finish. I didn't need to." He understood. He understood the sickness of poverty, the terror of the bill. the crippling fear that you were 1 minute too late. The small cabin was filled with our shared silence. He was standing a few feet from me. The space between us felt charged, electric. He had shared his deepest scar. I had shared mine. He didn't move toward me. He just watched my face, his expression unreadable but intense. He was waiting, just as he had in his office, just as he had with the meeting. He was giving me the choice. He would not take, he would only accept. My heart was hammering, a frantic bird against my ribs, but it wasn't fear, not of him. I was looking at the only man in Northvale who understood. I gave a single nod. It was tiny, a movement so slight it was barely there, thin as a thread. But it was enough. He moved slowly, deliberately. He lifted one hand, not to grab me, but to trace the line of my jaw. His fingers were calloused from the pen, from whatever else he did, but his touch was impossibly light. His thumb brushed my chin, his gray eyes searching mine, asking the question one last time. I didn't pull away, I didn't flinch, I just breathed. He leaned in. The first kiss was tentative. It was just pressure, a soft, warm exploration. It was a question, not a demand. It tasted of mint and the cold night air. It wasn't rushed. It was the first slow, calm thing that had happened to me in weeks. My body, which had been tense for a month, started to unknot. I lifted my hand, not to push him away, but to steady myself. My fingers found the lapel of his heavy wool coat, and I gripped it. That small act, that grip, was my answer. The kiss changed. It deepened. His other hand found my waist, pulling me slightly closer. Our breathing, which had been shallow and nervous, synced. It was a slow, deep rhythm. He wasn't stealing my air. He was sharing his... He pulled back, only an inch. His forehead rested against mine. Our breath mingled in the cold air. "Okay," he whispered. His voice was rough. I couldn't find my words. I just squeezed his hand, the one that had found mine. A clear, unmistakable yes. He kissed me again. This time, I wasn't the frozen, scared girl from the alley. I was an active participant. I kissed him back. It was warm, and it was passionate, but it was anchored. It was rooted in the respect for the boundaries he had so carefully maintained. His arms were around me, but they were a shield, not a cage. The dim lights of the port cranes painted the cabin in strokes of red and blue, reflecting on his skin, on the glass, like captured raindrops. I was still cold from the walk, and I was still scared of tomorrow, but I wasn't scared of this. I leaned in, pressing closer, seeking his warmth. I wasn't just accepting his embrace, I was actively pulling him closer. He responded instantly. His arms tightened around me, gathering me in. One hand splayed wide across my back, holding me firmly, securely, as if he was shielding me from the world. It was the single safest I had felt in my entire life. We stood there for a long, quiet time, just breathing. The only sounds were the deep thrum of the bridge overhead and the steady beat of my heart, which was finally, slowing down. When we eventually drew apart, it was slowly. I looked up at him. The hard lines of his face were softer in the dim light. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched one corner of his mouth. It wasn't the cold, sharp crescent from the restaurant. This was real. I found myself smiling back, a small, tired smile. There were no grand promises, no words about love or a future. It wasn't that. It was something more immediate. "We're on the same side," I whispered. He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "We are." We had to go. The night was getting late, and tomorrow was tomorrow. The meeting at the dovetail rink hung over us. We stood at the door of the wheelhouse. The cold air rushed in as he opened it. "Ava!" I turned. He was reaching into his overcoat pocket. He pulled out a small, flat, black velvet box. My breath caught. He opened it. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a silver chain. Attached to it was a single charm, intricately carved. It was a raven, its wings tucked, its head bowed, as if it were observing. It was beautiful. "Turn around," he said, his voice quiet. I turned, my back to him. I lifted my hair. His fingers, warm from his pocket, brushed the back of my neck as he fastened the clasp. The metal was cold and heavy against my skin, a sudden solid weight. I turned back, my fingers finding the charm, tracing its shape. "Silas," I started, not knowing what to say. He stopped me, his hand covering mine, pressing the charm to my chest. "It's a symbol," he said, his voice firm. "Not a chain. It means you're under my protection. But the choice is always yours. If it ever feels too heavy, you take it off. I'll accept it." He meant it. Even now, he was giving me an exit. I closed my hand over his. "Over the Raven. I'll wear it, Mai." He nodded once. We stepped out of the warm cabin, back into the freezing Northvale night, the silver Raven, a heavy, secret weight beneath my coat. The Dovetail ice rink was a graveyard of good intentions. It had been shuttered for a decade, a relic of Northvale's failed downtown revitalization project. The cab driver wouldn't even pull into the cracked parking lot. He just pointed at the chain-link fence and I paid him in cash. I walked the last 100 yards. The air was dead, still, and smelled like freezer burn and old cigarettes. The silver Raven under my shirt was a heavy, cold weight. The pepper gel was a hard rectangle in my coat pocket. The only light came from the massive, crumbling neon sign over the rental booth. Half the letters in Dovetail were burned out, so it just pulsed D via L, casting the entire arena in a sickly, flickering blue. I could hear my own breathing, amplified by the silence. The wire taped to my skin felt like a patch of ice. He was already there, standing in the dead center of the rink, on the cracked, frosted-over ice. Cade Ellison. Silas had been right. He wore a dark, vintage pilot's jacket with a thick shearling collar, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He was smiling. That was the worst part. He was standing in this wasteland, in the pulsing blue light, smiling like a man who had already won. "Ava Linwood," he called out. His voice was thin and sharp in the cold air, echoing off the high, derelict roof. The ghost of Vanguard Portage, Silas Voss's little pet witness. I didn't answer. I just walked through the open gate, my boots clumsy on the rubber mats, and stepped onto the ice. It was slick. Far slicker than I expected. I stopped near the boards. "I'm here," I said. My voice was a croak. "That you are," he chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. He started to glide toward me, not skating, just sliding on his boot soles. "You're smart, I'll give you that. Smarter than that idiot Danner. You picked the winning horse, but you picked the wrong race. Sweetheart, Voss has you on a leash." "I'm not on a leash?" "No." He stopped, about 20 feet away. "He's got your mom tucked away in his private clinic. He's got you wearing his silver. You're not his witness. You're his collateral, his property." "I'm not his property," I said, my voice firmer. "Whatever you need to tell yourself." He spread his hands, a gesture of fake generosity. "I'm not here to hurt you, Ava. I'm here to offer you the out you've been looking for. I saw your post. Family emergency. You're scared. You want to run. I'm offering you the chance." "What chance?" "A plane ticket, first class, anywhere in the world you want to go. A new name, a new life. Enough money to set your mother up in the best private clinic in Arizona, where the sun actually shines. No more Northvale. No more looking over your shoulder. You're just gone." It was a perfect, beautiful trap. It was everything I had wanted 3 weeks ago. "In exchange for what?" I asked. He smiled, his teeth very white in the blue light. "One little thing, a file. The Blue K shipping route. His private manifest, the one he uses when he doesn't want the feds or Halcyon to see his cargo. Give me the access code, and you're free. He'll just think you panicked and ran. He'll never even look for you." This was it, the entire game. He was asking me to betray Silas for the very freedom Silas was pretending to offer me. I had to stall. I had to give the signal. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking, but I let them. I let him see me tremble. It was what he expected. "I have to," I stammered, holding the phone up. "I have to call my mother. I have to check on her. Before I do anything." Ellison's smile widened. He was indulgent. He had me. "Sure, kid. Call your mom. Make sure she's all tucked in." I turned away from him, my back to the rink, my thumb hitting the call button for the number Rowan had given me. But the call didn't matter. The wire was live. I just had to say the words. I put the phone to my ear. "Mom," I whispered, playing the part. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm at the bus station." I took a shaky breath. "But the night's getting cold, colder than I thought it would be." The words were barely out of my mouth. Click, fwoom! The world vanished. It wasn't just the DVEL sign, it was everything. The streetlights outside the fence, the security lamps on the neighboring buildings. Rowan hadn't just hit a switch, he'd cut the power to the entire grid block. It was an absolute, suffocating darkness, the kind of black that pressed against your eyes. "What the?" Ellison roared, his voice suddenly sharp with panic. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I dropped the phone and scrambled, slipping on the ice, crawling on my hands and knees toward the shadows. I remembered the old, abandoned DJ booth. I slammed into the plywood structure and huddled behind it, my heart trying to escape my chest. My breath was fog in the blackness. Then I heard it. It wasn't a footstep. It was a sound, a high-pitched electronic whine, like a hornet, amplified by 1,000. I risked a look. 2 sets of tiny, colored LEDs, one red, one green, zipped through the air. They weren't lights. They were drones. Ziz thwack! One of them, the green one, dove at the spot where I had been standing. I heard a zing sound, and a long, 3-inch gash appeared in the wooden boards of the rink. They were armed. They had blades. This was Halcyon Gray's tech trap. "Where is she?" Ellison shouted. He was just a shape in the dark. "Find her! Find the girl!" The red drone zipped past, slowed, and then hovered. Its lights pulsing. It was scanning. It turned, its lights fixing on the DJ booth. It had seen me. I pressed myself flat against the cold, damp wood, my hand over my mouth, the pepper gel cold in my other hand. "And they're just machines, Cade." "Silas?" His voice came from the main entrance. He was a silhouette against the slightly less black skyline. He was standing there, hands in his coat pockets. He wasn't armed. He looked bored. "Voss," Ellison shrieked. The green drone, the one that had attacked the boards, shot directly at Silas. It moved at an impossible speed. Silas didn't run. He didn't even flinch. He just took one casual step to the side, as if avoiding a slow-moving puddle. The drone shot past him, unable to correct its course, and slammed into the concrete wall of the stadium. It fell to the ground in a shower of sparks and plastic. One down. "You're pathetic," Silas said, his voice calm, carrying easily in the cold, still air. "You bring toys to a negotiation. You send desperate men to burn apartments. You have no foundation." "Rules?" Ellison laughed, a harsh, panicked sound. "We're criminals. Voss, there are no rules, only winners." "There's one," Silas said, taking a slow step onto the ice. He didn't slip. "The law of the docks. You don't get rich by burning the port down. You make it run, and you don't ever go after the families. You don't touch the weak. You broke the law. Cade, not mine. The law." The red drone was still hovering near me, its blades whining, caught between targets. "You're dead!" Voss, Ellison screamed. He was losing control. "I'll kill her, and then I'll—" He lost his patience. He broke. He didn't go for Silas. He went for me. He lunged across the ice, his speed terrifying. He grabbed me by my hair, yanking me out from behind the booth. I screamed. He spun me around, his arm locking like a steel bar across my throat, cutting off my air. I felt the cold, hard press of a knife blade against my ribs. "One more step. Voss?" Ellison screamed, his voice hoarse, his face inches from mine. "One move from you or your sniper, and your witness is gone. I'll take her down with me." I was choking. My lungs were on fire. The silver raven was digging into my collarbone. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. But my hand was still in my pocket, and I was still holding the gel. He was screaming at Silas, his grip tightening. I ripped my hand free, brought the canister up, jammed my thumb onto the trigger, and shoved my fist backward right into his face. A thick, blindingly orange stream of pepper gel hit him square in the eyes. He screamed. It was not a roar of anger. It was a high-pitched, wet, agonized shriek of pure pain. His arm around my throat vanished. His hands flew to his face. I can't see my eyes, it burns. I fell to my knees, gasping, crawling backward on the ice. At the exact same instant, the red drone that had been hovering above us zipped straight up, as if yanked by a string. A dull thwump sounded from the roof, a weighted net, heavy and black, shot from the darkness and enveloped the drone. It fell to the ice, tangled and dead. Rowan. Ellison was on his knees, howling, clawing at his face. Silas walked past me. He didn't run. He calmly kicked the knife, which had skittered across the ice, into the darkness. He didn't hit Ellison. He didn't kick him. He grabbed the front of Ellison's jacket, twisted him, and slammed him face first onto the ice. He pulled Ellison's arm behind his back in a single, brutal, and controlled motion. I heard a muffled snap of plastic, a zip tie, a second one on his ankles. It was over. In 5 seconds, Ellison was neutralized, sobbing and still screaming about his eyes. Silas stood up. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked at me, then at the 2 broken drones, then at the man writhing on the ice. Then he did the last thing I ever expected. He pulled out his phone. He didn't call Rowan. He didn't call a cleanup crew. "Agent Riley," he said into the phone. My heart stopped. He was calling the ITB. "This is Silas Voss. I have a gift for you." "Yes, Cade Ellison. In the flesh, he is. At the Dovetail ice rink, he resisted, but he's contained O. And I have something else for you. A full, encrypted data drive. The entire Halcyon Gray crypto mining operation. Every illegal module. Every offshore account. Every bribe to Kurt Danner. Yes, I'll trade you Ellison and Halcyon for Bay 9. I want your investigation into my consortium closed. Permanently, you get the win." He was silent, listening. "I thought so. See you in 10 minutes, an agent come alone." He hung up. He turned to me. The moon had finally broken through the clouds, and the power was coming back on block by block. But the rink was still dark. I finally understood. I had been terrified I was working for a monster, a criminal who operated in pure, chaotic darkness. I was wrong. Silas Voss wasn't chaos. He wasn't a rabid dog like Ellison. He was order. He was a man with a framework. He didn't break the law because he was evil. He used the law. He used it as a weapon, as a shield, as a bargaining chip. He would operate outside of it when necessary, but he preferred to operate above it. He hadn't handled Ellison. He had gift-wrapped him for the feds in exchange for his own clean slate. He walked over to me. My knees were still shaking. He held out his hand. I took it. His grip was warm and solid. He pulled me to my feet. "You did well, Ava," he said, his voice just a low rumble, the first hint of praise I'd ever heard from him. "You didn't move, and then, when it mattered, you did." He kept my hand, pulling me close. His other arm going around my waist, he started leading me toward the dark exit, just as the first wail of distant, official sirens began to cut through the cold North Vale night. We left the Dovetail rink just as the first blue and red lights painted the chain-link fence. We didn't talk. The silence in Silas's sedan was heavier than the armor plating I was sure it had. He drove me to a corporate apartment I'd never seen, gave me a key, and said, "Rowan will be at the door. You're secure here. Sleep." I didn't sleep. By dawn, the video was everywhere. Someone, likely Rowan, had leaked the high-definition security footage from the rink. It wasn't the grainy, vague clip from the alley. This was pristine. It showed Cade Ellison clear as day, screaming about his eyes. It showed the high-tech, bladed drones. It showed me, ducking behind the DJ booth, and it showed Silas, in his overcoat, walking calmly onto the ice, hands in his pockets, dismantling Ellison's entire operation without ever raising his voice. The media narrative exploded. The North Vale Ledger called it the ice rink gambit. Half the city was calling him a sociopath who set a trap. The other half was calling him a folk hero. The consensus on the street was a grudging, deep respect. The waterfront wolf wasn't just a thug. He was a chess master. He hadn't just defeated his enemy. He'd used the Interstate Trade Bureau as his weapon. The victory lasted for exactly 12 hours. Halcyon Gray wasn't just Cade Ellison. Ellison was the muscle. Halcyon was money, and money hires lawyers. They couldn't hit Silas in the street, so they hit him in the press, right where he lived. The headline on the Ledger's website was brutal. Silver Pardon Charity used as slush fund sources. Alleged Voss Consortium bribing hospitals for testimony. My stomach turned to acid. The article was a masterpiece of implication. It alleged that the Silver Pardon Fund wasn't charity. It was a front. It was Silas's carrot to coerce organizations. And then, the killing blow. The primary recipient of this charity, the brand new, exclusive Linwood Riverside Kidney Center. And who is its sole VIP patient? Receiving care far exceeding her means, the mother of Ava Linwood, the protected witness, Mr. Voss used to entrap Cade Ellison. They had done it. They had taken the one good, clean thing he'd done, the one thing that had bound me to him, and twisted it into a bribe. My mother, a sick woman, was now the public face of his alleged corruption. I raced to the clinic. The lobby, once serene and quiet, was a circus. Reporters, cameras, shouting, they swarmed me as I came through the doors. Miss Linwood, did Silas Voss buy your testimony by paying for your mother's care? How much are you being paid? Is your mother a willing participant in this fraud? I froze, blinded by the camera flashes. Rowan Slate materialized from the chaos. He didn't speak. He didn't touch anyone. He was just a 7-foot wall of gray suit and silent menace, and the crowd simply parted. He ushered me into the private elevator. "They've been here for an hour," he rasped, his voice like gravel. "She's been moved to the penthouse suite, floor 12. She's secure, but she's seen the news." The suite was bigger than my entire apartment building, but my mother was sitting on the edge of a lavish bed, her hands trembling, staring at the muted television. "Ava," she whispered, her eyes wide with a terror I had never seen. They're saying I'm part of a crime, that this room, it's a bribe." "It's not, Mom, it's a lie. They're just trying to scare us." "Is it a lie?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Ava, who is this man?" That question, the doubt in her eyes, cut me deeper than any of Ellison's threats. I found Silas at the Vanguard office. For the first time, all the lights were on. The place felt exposed, vulnerable. He was standing by the window, staring at the docks. He didn't turn when I entered. "Halcyon's lawyers are good," he said, his voice flat. "They just put a knife in the Silver Pardon's reputation." "You have to fix it," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You have to tell them the truth." "It doesn't matter what I tell them." He turned, his face like granite. "The ITB just made its move. Agent Riley called. The deal at the rink, it's off." "What? But you gave them Ellison. You gave them the drive." "I gave them Ellison," he corrected, "and I gave them the crypto mining operation, the appetizer, as she called it. They know I'm vulnerable. They know the press is eating my foundation alive, so they've renegotiated." "What do they want?" "Everything. The full money laundering map. The offshore accounts that link Halcyon to 2 city councilmen and a federal judge. They're offering conditional immunity for the Voss Consortium if I deliver the entire Halcyon network, from the street to the bench, in 30 days. "So do it," I said. "Burn them to the ground. This is what you wanted." "No," he said, his voice cold. "That's not what I wanted. If I give them that data, I expose my network. I expose my sources. I show the feds and every other organization in this city how I know things. It saves my public reputation, but it guts my operation. It leaves me blind." He was hesitating. He was actually weighing it. He was considering letting the investigation into Bay 9 continue, letting my mother's name be dragged through the mud, all to protect his network of shadows. I stepped closer, the ice from the rink reforming in my veins. "Let me be clear. You are going to let them call my sick mother a criminal on the evening news to protect your sources." He just watched me, his face an impassive mask. "You stood in that wheelhouse and told me you built that fund to protect the weak. You told me it was your wall. Well, here it is. The attack is here. You have a choice. Silas." My voice was a low, shaking whisper. "You can save your network, or you can save the people you claim to protect. You can save your reputation as the untouchable wolf, or you can save the people in your pardon. You can't have both. Choose." I turned and walked out, leaving him alone in the bright, empty room. The next move came from the last person I expected, a restricted number. Miklos Arden. He wasn't yelling, he was sobbing. "Miss Linwood, Ava, please, you gotta help me." "I have nothing to say to you, Miklos. The class action, that your gray-suited friend he encouraged. They're taking the building. They're taking my savings. I'm ruined. I'll be on the street. Please call him off. I know you're the one. Just a word from you." "And why would I do that?" "I have information," he squeaked. "Real information. Not just the wiring. About them. About Halcyon. About that manager Danner." I stopped. "Go on." Danner. He wasn't just leaking schedules. He was the bridge. He was the one who connected Ellison's muscle to Halcyon's money. "I saw them in the alley. I saw him taking the payments. The envelopes I can testify. I can put Danner away as the key money man, and Danner will flip on all of Halcyon. It'll clean this whole mess up for your friend." He was desperate, and he was offering me the key. The one thing Silas needed, a way to burn Halcyon without exposing his own network. I brought the information to Silas. I didn't frame it as a request. I stated it as a fact. He listened, his expression unmoving, but I saw the calculation in his eyes. This was the leverage he needed, not against Halcyon, but against the ITB. He picked up his phone. "Rowan, the Larkspur Hotel. 8 o'clock tonight, the 13th floor dining room. Private table. I'm having dinner with Agent Riley. Tell her I'm ready to accept her offer." The Larkspur was all dark wood, cut crystal, and hushed silence. The 13th floor was a single, private room with a table overlooking the entire, glittering sprawl of Northvale. I was there. Silas had insisted. "You're AL. You're the protected witness. You're the center of this. You will be at the table." Agent Riley arrived at 8 sharp. Her black pantsuit was severe, her gaze sharp. She looked surprised and annoyed to see me. "Mr. Voss," she said, sitting. "Miss Linwood, a bold move, bringing your primary bribe recipient to the final negotiation." "Ava is my protected witness," Silas said, his voice as smooth as the polished wood. "And she's the reason we're here. She just secured your star witness." Riley paused. "Ellison is my star witness." Ellison is a thug," Silas countered, pushing a glass of water toward her. "He'll get 10 years. Miklos Arden, however, is the landlord who just flipped. He can testify that he personally witnessed Kurt Danner acting as the financial bridge between Cade Ellison and the Halcyon network. Danner will break. He'll give you the offshore accounts. You get the entire network. Clean." Riley's eyes narrowed. "And what does Arden want?" "Immunity and his building back, which you will arrange," Silas said. "That's a high price." "It's a high-value target," Silas leaned forward. "So, we have a deal. I give you Miklos, who gives you Danner, who gives you the entire Halcyon organization. In return?" Riley slid a folder across the table. "The Montclair Accord. As we discussed, we dropped the Bay 9 investigation. We publicly clear the Silver Pardon Fund, and we get the full, unredacted data from Danner's cooperation, conditional on success." It was a win. He'd done it. He'd saved his network and his reputation. "One more thing," Silas said, not touching the folder. Riley sighed, frustrated. "There's always one more thing, Mr. Voss. The agreement needs a protection clause for my witness." "She's your witness." "She's a civilian," Silas said, his voice flat. "I want full federal protection, relocation, new identity, the works, on the record." Riley's gaze flashed to me, then back to him. "You're negotiating for her protection from us from the blowback. I'm protecting her from Halcyon's remnants, from Ellison's allies, and from a federal bureau that might decide to re-interview her in a year, when it's politically convenient." A tense silence filled the room. Riley picked up her pen. "Name." I watched Silas. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. "Initials 8 lungs," he said. My heart stopped. A.L. Ava Linwood. He was writing my protection into his deal with the federal government. It was an out, a real one, a parachute. He was giving me the legal power to disappear even from him. I stared at him, my mind reeling. The choice. He was giving me the answer to my ultimatum. He met my gaze. The look in his eyes was absolute. "I choose people," he said, his voice so low only I could hear it. He had chosen me, over his network, over his pride, and he was giving me the key. He signed the accord. Riley countersigned it. It was done. We rode the private elevator down in silence, the adrenaline from the last 48 hours, the fear, the anger, the sudden, shocking relief, it all crashed down on me at once. The elevator car seemed to tilt. I swayed, my knees buckling. Silas caught me before I could fall. He didn't say anything. He just put one arm around my waist, pulling me against his side, his other hand coming up to steady my head. I didn't have the strength to fight or to think. I just leaned. I let my full weight rest against him, my eyes closing. I was so exhausted I could barely stand. The elevator doors chimed and opened to the bright, empty lobby. We didn't move. He just held me. He shifted, turning me slightly, and tilted my chin up. His forehead came down to rest against mine. We stood there, in the open elevator, just breathing, his strength holding me up, my exhaustion leaning into him. We were tired, we were battered, but we were on the same side. We were one. The Montclair Accord was signed, the ink was dry, but Cade Ellison was just the face of Halcyon. The organization itself was a wounded animal, still possessed of teeth and claws. It was cornered, and it was about to bite. We didn't go to the secure apartment. We didn't go to the clinic. As we left the elevator at the Larkspur, Silas's hand was a firm, possessive weight on my lower back. "They have one move left," he said, his voice a low vibration against my ear as he guided me to the sedan. "It's not about the money anymore. It's not about the network. It's a spite play. They lost. Now they want to burn the board." "Burn me?" "You're the center of the board," he said. The car door clicked shut, encasing us in tomb-like silence. "They'll go where it started, where they think you're weakest." The sedan didn't head for the docks. It cut through the empty, snow-dusted streets and pulled into the dark alley behind the Rook and Raven. My blood ran cold. "Here. This is where you entered the game. This is where they'll try to take you off it. They think you're sentimental. They think you're alone." He killed the engine, and the alley was plunged into the same cold, wet darkness as that first night. They're wrong. We slipped through the unlocked steel kitchen door. The restaurant was a steel and shadow maze. Moonlight from the high, dirty windows gleamed on the stainless steel prep tables, making the room look like a submerged wreck. It was cold, and it smelled of stale wine and disinfectant. We moved into the dry storage pantry, a dark closet smelling of flour and dried herbs. "Rowan's sources confirmed it," Silas murmured, his breath stirring my hair. "They know the accord is in play. They're coming to grab you. Their last piece of leverage. They think they can force a trade. You for Ellison." "How?" "Danner. He's their key. He's in federal custody, but his Halcyon contacts are still active. They've ordered him to lead them to you. A key scraped in the back door lock. The sound was horribly loud in the silent kitchen. I held my breath. Silas's hand covered my mouth, a gesture of silence, not aggression. The door swung open. 4 men, dark shapes against the alley's dim light, spilled in. They were followed by a 5th, smaller man who was shaking so hard I could see it from 20 feet away. Kurt Danner. "I told you," Kurt hissed, his voice a terrified squeak. "She comes back here sometimes. She left stuff in her locker. She's sentimental, just like you said." "Shut up, Danner," a thick, gravelly voice snapped. The leader. He was built like a refrigerator, carrying a heavy-looking coil of zip ties. "Find her. You said she'd be here. You get us the girl. Halcyon gets you out of the country before Voss's pet feds can make you sing. Now find her." I'm looking," Kurt stammered, shuffling forward. The 4 men fanned out, their movements clumsy in the unfamiliar space. Silas stepped out of the pantry. He didn't shout. He just appeared. "He can't help you, gentlemen," Silas said back, his voice calm and resonant in the steel room. "He already works for me." For a second, everything froze. The men spun. Kurt Danner shrieked and dove behind the industrial dish pit. "It's Voss," the leader roared. "Grab him, grab her!" 1 man lunged at Silas. 2 others fanned out. The 4th, a thin, fast man with a knife, saw me shrinking back into the pantry and came right for me. But Kurt Danner wasn't just hiding. He was acting. "It's a setup," he screamed, not at his Halcyon crew, but at us. "He told me you'd be here. He said to lead them in." "You traitor!" the leader roared, trying to get at him. "He played me the recording," Kurt shrieked, his voice cracking. "The one of Miklos selling me to Voss. Voss said Halcyon would cut my throat for failing. He said he was the only one who could keep me safe. He keeps his word." Danner wasn't a last-minute flip. He was a double agent. Silas had recruited him in that federal holding cell, using Miklos's betrayal as the leverage. This whole night was a performance. The man with the knife didn't care. He lunged at me, blade first. I didn't freeze. I wasn't the girl from the alley. I wasn't the girl on the ice. I grabbed the first thing my hand found in the dark. It was heavy, cast iron with a long handle, a skillet. He slashed. I didn't cower. I swung it like a baseball bat. The clang of iron hitting his wrist and the steel doorframe was deafening. The knife spun away, skittering across the tile. The man screamed, a high, wet sound, clutching his shattered hand. The rest of the fight was just noise. It wasn't a brawl. It was an elimination. I saw Silas move, a blur of black wool. He wasn't a brawler. He was a machine. He grabbed the arm of 1 man and used his momentum to spin him, sending him crashing into a towering, wheeled rack of sheet pans. The entire structure, hundreds of pounds of metal, collapsed on top of the man with a sound like a symphony dying. The leader, the big one, was the only one left. He pulled a heavy pipe from his coat and charged Silas, roaring. Silas didn't meet the charge. He pivoted, like a matador. The man's own weight carried him past. Silas grabbed the back of the man's thick neck, spun him, and ran him forward, the man's head connected with the heavy, insulated door of the walk-in freezer with a sickening, wet thud. The man's body went limp. Silas didn't let him fall. He held him there, pinned against the stainless steel. His forearm pressed hard against the man's throat, not crushing, just containing. He wasn't killing him. He was subduing him. He was asserting absolute, cold control. The kitchen was suddenly silent, save for the moans of the man with the broken wrist and the clatter of the settling sheet pans. It was over. As the leader's body slumped, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text from Rowan Slate. My hand was shaking as I opened it. It was a picture. My mother, she was asleep, tucked into a gurney, an oxygen mask over her face, looking peaceful, but she wasn't in the penthouse. She was in the back of a state-of-the-art ambulance. The logo on the side was a discreet silver shield. Northvale Shield Private Transport, Rowan in surgical scrubs, was at the wheel. The text was simple: asset is mobile, en route to tertiary safe house. Media compromised primary location. Silas had been playing 4 games at once. While Halcyon was planning this raid, he was having Rowan move my mother, anticipating the very media leak he, himself, had helped create. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert from the North Vale Ledger. ITB raids multiple warehouses in Voss-related bust. I clicked the link. The story was breaking. Armed with information from a cooperating witness, Danner, and a civilian informant, Miklos, Agent Riley had hit every Halcyon warehouse simultaneously. The assemblage art, the story read, was discovered to be a front for one of the largest illegal cryptocurrency mining farms in the Midwest, responsible for millions in siphoned city power. Halcyon wasn't just broken, it was gutted, its assets seized, its operation exposed. A third buzz, this one from the Greystone 12 Tenant Forum, a group I hadn't checked in weeks. It was a video, shot on a phone. From a high window, it showed the lobby of my old building. Miklos Arden, his hair wild, wearing a stained bathrobe, was being led out in handcuffs by 2 North Vale police officers. The charge, a user commented, was felony utility fraud and racketeering. As the officers pushed Miklos into the squad car, the video's audio filled with cheering. People were on their balconies. Mrs. Petrov, from 4C, was banging a pot with a wooden spoon. They were celebrating. A sound came out of my throat. It was rusty, strange. It was a laugh. The police sirens in the distance were for our backup. The feds were coming for Danner. The local police were coming for the Halcyon crew. Silas released the unconscious leader, letting him slide to the floor. He walked over to Kurt Danner, who was still trembling by the dish pit. "Rowan will meet your federal contact at the corner." Silas said, "You did well. Kurt, you'll be safe." He turned to me, his coat immaculate, his hair unruffled. "Come." He didn't lead me to the alley. He led me through the dark, opulent dining room, past the table where he'd sat, past the spot where I'd spilled the water. He led me to a stairwell I never knew existed, one for staff, and we climbed up past the private dining rooms until we hit a heavy steel door. He pushed it open. The city noise hit me, but it was muffled. A new, soft silence had fallen. It was snowing. Thick, heavy flakes were drifting from the gray sky, blanketing the tar paper roof, covering the grime of the city. We were on the roof of the Rook and Raven. The air was pure, cold, and clean. We walked to the ledge. Far below, the river was a black, icy ribbon. The docks were quiet. A single train horn cried out, a long, low sound, signaling a change of seasons. "It's over," Silas said, watching the snow fall on the bridge. "Almost." I turned to him. The snowflakes were like tiny diamonds in his dark hair. The tension that had held his face like a granite mask for weeks was finally gone. He looked human. He looked tired. "And you?" I asked. My voice was a cloud of white vapor in the cold. "The Accord. The ITB is done with Bay 9. Halcyon is gone. What happens to Silas Voss?" He turned to look at me. His gray eyes, usually so flat, were clear, reflecting the white snow. "I'm still me. Vanguard Portage will be audited for the next 90 days. Just as the Accord dictates, they'll find nothing. The consortium is clean. The board is reset." He took a step closer. The cold between us vanished, replaced by the heat from his coat. "The only variable left is you." "Me?" "The almost." He reached into his coat pocket. My heart didn't leap. It just waited. He pulled out his wallet, but he didn't open it. From a different pocket, he produced a single, thin, black plastic card. He held it out. I took it. It was a corporate ID card. The plastic was new. The company name was simple, Raven Linwood Services. My picture was on it, the one from my Vanguard ID, but my title was Operations Manager. I looked up at him, confused. "Silas, what is this?" "It's a logistics consulting firm," he said, his voice quiet. "Fully registered, bonded and legitimate. It provides analysis and efficiency solutions for the Voss Consortium and other clients. It's clean, it's a satellite, and it's yours. I stared at the card. Operations manager, a salary, a desk, a life. It was an escape, a way out of aprons, out of alleys, out of the shadows. I can't, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. I can't take this. After everything, the 10,000, my mother's care, the clinic, Silas, the debt I owe you, I can't ever. The word hung in the air. Debt. The word that had started this all. He didn't move. He just watched me. I looked at the card. I looked at his face. I saw the boy from Merrow Park, the man from the wheelhouse, the man who had given me a choice in the elevator at the Larkspur. No, I said, my voice was suddenly strong. I stepped forward. I took his gloved hand, not his arm, not his coat, his hand. I laced my fingers with his. He looked down at our joined hands, his expression unreadable. I held up the little black card with my free hand. This isn't debt, I said, meeting his gaze. Not anymore. He searched my face, seeing the truth there. It's a choice. I squeezed his hand, he squeezed back, his grip strong and sure, and we stood there, on the roof, surrounded by the silent, falling snow. Finally, on the same side, the snow on the rooftop was a false peace. It melted within 2 days, turning Northvale back into a city of damp concrete and gray slush. The accord was signed, Halcyon was gone, and Cade Ellison was in a federal holding cell. We had won. We had won for about a weekend. Halcyon, it turned out, had one last spiteful move. It wasn't a bullet. It wasn't a bomb. It was a lawyer. From the grave, the Halcyon organization filed a structured default, a poison pill bankruptcy. They claimed their entire operation was built on financial irregularities, not from them, but from their primary shipping partner, the Voss Consortium. It was a brilliant, venomous lie, and it triggered an investigation from an entity that made the ITB look like a traffic cop, the Federal Finance Directorate. They didn't just investigate Bay 9, they froze everything. The consortium accounts, the Vanguard accounts, and, most cruelly, the assets of the Silver Pardon Foundation. My mother's penthouse room at the Linwood Riverside Clinic vanished. The funding was locked. Pending the investigation, she wasn't on the street. Silas had already paid for her next 2 months in a standard room, but the message was clear. We were back on the knife's edge. The climax wasn't in a kitchen. It was in a hearing room. The granite hall was a cold, echoing chamber of marble, all gray and white, designed to make you feel small. We sat at one table, Silas, his lawyer, and me. At the other, a team of stone-faced auditors from the FFD. Agent Riley of the ITB was there too, looking furious that her win had been co-opted. The lead prosecutor, a man named Blevins, was methodical. He wasn't interested in the crypto mining or the drones. He was interested in the seed. Mr. Voss, Blevins said, his voice dry as old paper. This all seems convenient. An entire criminal network, Halcyon Gray, is brought down, and the only beneficiary is your organization, an organization whose accounts, we find, are opaque. My accounts are private, Silas said. So private, Blevins countered, that you seem to conduct business in cash, in alleys, with employees you've only just hired. He was walking the line. He was painting the entire Montclair Accord as a sham, a conspiracy between Voss and the ITB. You could clear this all up, Mr. Voss, Blevins said, offering a sickening, reasonable smile. This entire inquiry hinges on one event, the initial payment of $10,000, the payment that, by your own admission at a press conference, started this. Just state for the record that Miss Linwood, a low-level night receptionist, acted outside her authority. State that the payment was unauthorized. State that you were merely cleaning up her mess. He was offering Silas an escape hatch. He could throw me under the bus. He could paint me as a mistake, a low-level employee who misunderstood. It would invalidate my protected witness status, but it would sever his personal connection to the money. He could save his consortium. He could save himself. Silas didn't even look at him. He was looking at me. I remembered his words in the elevator. I choose people. Before he could speak, I stood up. My knees weren't shaking. My voice wasn't a whisper. The girl who had frozen in the alley was gone. My name is Ava Linwood. I am the operations manager of Raven Linwood Services, a logistics compliance firm contracted by the Voss Consortium. Blevins looked at me, annoyed. Ma'am, with respect, you were a waitress, then you were a night receptionist at a warehouse. That is correct, I said, my voice sharp and cold, echoing in the marble room. Mister, Voss hired me specifically because I was an outsider. My probationary role at Vanguard Portage was to identify and rectify the very compliance gaps Halcyon Gray had exploited. I was hired to create a new, transparent protocol. I slid a slim, leather-bound book across the table, my logbook, the one I had started keeping after my first night. This is the Raven Linwood Procedural Manual, I said. It outlines a new, triple verification system for all manifests, separating billing from logistics. Vanguard is already implementing it for its 90-day audit. My presence wasn't a coincidence. Mr. Blevins, it was the solution. Blevins was momentarily speechless. I hadn't just defended myself. I had legitimized my entire history. I had turned my front job into a corporate audit. But he was good. He recovered. He smiled. A commendable effort, Miss Linwood, a very tidy narrative, but it doesn't change the facts. The money, $10,000, in cash, in an apron. Who authorized that payment? This was it, the final question. Silas Voss stood up. He was a black granite column in the gray room. He didn't look at Blevins. He looked at the panel of directors. I did. The room was absolutely silent. I authorized the payment, Silas said, his voice a low, clear rumble. I authorized it as a retainer to secure a civilian who was being harassed by a criminal organization, an organization that this bureau and the ITB had failed to contain. I authorized it to secure medical care that the city had failed to provide, and I would authorize it again. He met Blevins's gaze. I will continue to authorize any and all payments necessary to protect the people who tell the truth. He hadn't just taken responsibility. He had drawn a line in the sand, publicly, legally. He had chosen me over his own deniability. Blevins was staggered, but he had one last card. He motioned to an aide. A large monitor lit up. It was the picture, the grainy, dark photo from the gossip website. Me in the alley, taking the bag. You call that a retainer, Mr. Voss, Blevins sneered. I call it a payoff. It looks like a bag of cash being passed in a dark alley. How do you explain that? I answered before Silas could. All eyes turned to me. I wasn't scared. I was a partner. That photo is irrelevant, I said, my voice ringing with a cold authority I didn't know I possessed. The legal classification of that payment was established as a witness protection retainer. It was publicly documented, on the record during the Montclair press conference. I looked at Agent Riley, an event that preceded this directorate's investigation. The federal government, via the ITB, has already accepted that classification by signing the Montclair Accord. I had used Silas's own press conference, his own legal shield, as the final, closing argument. We had just boxed Blevins in, using his own interagency rivalries. Riley, seeing her chance to protect her accord, chimed in. She's correct, Director. The ITB is satisfied. The matter of the $10,000 is a settled issue, as it pertains to the Danner-Ellison investigation. Blevins was done. He had nowhere to go. The chairman of the directorate, a pale woman with steel-gray hair, banged a small, symbolic gavel. This directorate finds no immediate cause to pierce the Montclair Accord. We will suspend the asset freeze on the Silver Pardon Foundation. A wave of relief so profound I nearly sat down. We will proceed, however, with the independent 90-day audit of Vanguard Portage, as stipulated. We had won. The snow was gone. A cold, damp Northvale spring had begun. The fallout was swift. Halcyon Gray, with its leaders gone and its assets seized, was formally dissolved. Cade Ellison, facing a mountain of evidence, took a plea 20 years. Kurt Danner entered the witness protection program and vanished. Rumor had it, to somewhere in Arizona. Miklos Arden, his testimony no longer needed, was sentenced to 2 years in a state facility for his utility fraud. The residents of Greystone 12 celebrated. I didn't move my mother back to the penthouse. I didn't move her back to Greystone. I moved her to a new 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside Quarters. It wasn't fancy. It was just clean. The walls were freshly painted. The wiring was inside the walls. The sunlight, on the rare days it appeared, came through clean, new windows. It was a home. That night, I met Silas on the pier by the Lockridge Bridge. Not the barge, just the old wooden pier. The wind was cold, but the ice was gone. The river was moving again. We stood for a long time, side by side, watching the container lights across the water. There were no fireworks, no grand celebrations, just the quiet thrum of the city and the lapping of black water against the wooden piles. He turned to me, the silver raven necklace a cool weight against my skin, hidden beneath my coat. I make few promises, Ava, he said, his voice quiet, but I keep the ones I make. He leaned in, and I met him halfway. The kiss was slow and deep and certain. It wasn't the hesitant exploration of the barge or the desperate connection in the elevator. This was an arrival. There was no more fear, no more running. I looked back at the city, at the lights of the bridge. My whole life had changed because of a wrong bill, because of $10,000 in a bag, because of a city full of masks, and the one man who had shown me the real face behind his... I finally understood. The real climax of our story hadn't been the fight in the kitchen. It wasn't the showdown on the ice. It wasn't even the hearing in the granite hall. It was the choice. It was the moment Silas Voss, the waterfront wolf, a man who had built an empire in the shadows, stood up in the brightest, coldest, most legal room in the city and chose me publicly over his own escape. He hadn't just saved me. He had legitimized me. The camera of my memory pulled back, leaving the two of us on the pier. It drifted back over the bridge, over the slow-moving river, over the quiet docks. It settled, for a moment, on a newly lit sign on the second floor of a clean, brick building just blocks from the water. A simple, tasteful, glowing sign. Raven Linwood Services? Our new life had begun. We still lived in a city of shadows, but now we had our own rules. Thank you so much for listening to our story. Where in the world are you tuning in from? We'd love to hear from you. Please let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can share this journey with us.